She was left to die on the rope. What this rancher did changed everything. The sun had barely begun to rise over the wide open fields of the ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp grass and earth, and the soft sounds of cows lowing in the distance filled the quiet morning. The rancher, a man used to early hours and hard work, walked along the dirt path that led to the barn. He had spent most of his life on this land. Every fence, every post, every field held a memory of long days and lonely nights. Today, however, something felt wrong. There was an unusual silence, a stillness that made him pause. As he rounded the corner of the old wooden barn, his eyes caught something he would never forget. A young woman hung from a rope, her body swaying slightly in the gentle morning wind. Her face was pale, her clothes torn and dirty, and there was a faint tremor in her hands and legs. She looked fragile, as if the slightest touch could break her. For a moment, the rancher froze. His heart raced, and his mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. Someone had left her here to die. Without a second thought, he ran toward her. "Hold on! I've got you!" he shouted, his voice firm but full of urgency. His hands shook slightly as he untied the rope, careful not to hurt her further. She slumped into his arms, weak and barely able to support her own weight. He could see bruises on her arms and face, signs of the struggle she must have endured. The rancher carried her across the field, his boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. He laid her gently on a pile of old blankets in his barn, checking for injuries as best as he could. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and her eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. You're alive," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or reassuring himself. She tried to speak but could only croak out a small sound. He handed her water from a tin cup, and she drank slowly, her hands trembling as she held it. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you here." He had helped injured animals before, even neighbors' children, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. The vulnerability in her eyes, the way she clung to him for safety, stirred something deep inside him, a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. The rancher knew he couldn't wait. He wrapped her in a warm blanket and carried her into his modest home. The fireplace was already lit, casting a golden glow over the small room. He placed her on a couch and fetched a first aid kit, carefully cleaning small cuts and checking her for any signs of serious injury. Her skin was cold to the touch, and he rubbed her hands gently to warm them. Neighbors started to gather outside when they noticed his truck parked unusually close to the barn. Curiosity mixed with concern rippled through the small community. A few people tried to peek through the windows, but the rancher shooed them away. "Not now!" "She needs rest," he said firmly. His voice left no room for argument. He didn't know who had left her there or why, but he knew that protecting her came first. As the morning passed, the young woman slowly began to regain some strength. She opened her eyes again, scanning the room as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. The rancher noticed the fear in her gaze and knelt beside her, speaking gently. "You're safe. No one is going to hurt you while I'm here." She gave a small nod, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. He didn't push. Sometimes words were too much too soon. Sometimes the only thing a person needed was silence and kindness. He went into the kitchen to make her a warm broth. The smell of herbs and simmering vegetables filled the room, mixing with the scent of the wood from the fire. She watched him from the couch, her eyes following every movement. The rancher tried to keep things normal, talking about everyday matters, the weather, the cows, the repair work he had planned for the barn. It was an effort to make her feel human again, to remind her that life outside of fear and pain still existed. When he returned with the broth, she took it hesitantly at first, then drank more steadily as she realized he wasn't going to let her hurt anyone. He sat quietly beside her, not pressing for answers. He knew trust had to be earned slowly. The woman's hands shook as she held the cup, and he could see tears threatening to fall from her eyes. He offered her a clean handkerchief, and she dabbed at her face, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. Hours passed, and the young woman finally began to speak in small fragments. She whispered about being attacked, about someone leaving her behind in the cold and lonely fields. Her voice was weak, her words broken, but they were enough to confirm what the rancher had feared. Someone had intended for her to die. He felt a mix of anger and determination rise within him. How could anyone do this? And more importantly, how could he make sure it never happened again? The rancher made a decision. He would not only help her recover physically, but also ensure her safety until the authorities could take over. He contacted a local doctor to check her for injuries and dehydration, explaining the urgency without revealing any unnecessary details. The doctor agreed to come immediately, impressed by the rancher's quick thinking and care. While waiting for the doctor, the rancher continued to keep her company. He shared small stories about the ranch, about his family, and about the animals that roamed freely on the property. At first, she listened quietly, only nodding, but gradually, she began to respond with soft words. A faint smile appeared on her face when he recounted a humorous story about a stubborn cow that refused to move from the barn. It was the first sign of life returning to her after the ordeal. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the doctor arrived. After a thorough checkup, he confirmed that, while she had suffered from exposure and minor injuries, she would survive with proper care. The relief in the rancher's chest was immense. He had saved a life today, and he knew that was only the beginning. Yet, even as the young woman rested, he couldn't ignore the fear lingering in her eyes.
The rancher promised her that they would figure out who had done this and that she would be safe from harm.
He knew it would take time for her to trust again, but he was determined to give her that chance. As night fell, the rancher stayed by her side. The soft glow of the fireplace illuminated the room, casting long shadows on the walls. He could see her slowly drift into a restless sleep, her breathing steadier than it had been in hours. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying a sense of calm after the day's chaos. But the rancher knew this was only the beginning. Whoever had left her to die might still be out there, watching, waiting, hoping she wouldn't survive. He clenched his fists, making a silent promise to protect her. He had seen too much pain to let it continue. She had been left to die, but he had arrived in time, and he would not fail her again. In the quiet of the night, the rancher sat by the window, looking out over the fields that stretched endlessly before him. He thought about the morning, about the fear in her eyes, and about the courage it would take for her to recover. But more than anything, he thought about what it meant to care for someone who had been abandoned by the world. That was the true measure of strength, he realized. Not just surviving oneself, but standing for someone else when they couldn't stand for themselves. And somewhere, in the darkness, the young woman whispered one word, a name, not fully clear, not fully understood, but enough to hint at danger, enough to remind the rancher that this was not over. She had survived today, but tomorrow, the real fight for safety and justice would begin, and he would be ready. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the windows of the rancher's home, illuminating the small room where the young woman slept. She looked peaceful, almost like a child after a long nightmare. The rancher watched her for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. Her injuries were healing, thanks to his care, but her spirit was still fragile. He knew that surviving the attack was only the first step. She had to trust him, and the world, again. He gently shook her shoulder. "It's morning. Time to wake up." His voice was calm, patient, not rushed. Slowly, her eyes opened, blinking against the warm sunlight. There was hesitation there, a quiet fear, as though the world itself might still be dangerous. He gave her a small smile. "You're safe. Breakfast is ready. Take your time." She sat up slowly, her movements careful. She seemed unsure how to trust her own strength, as if she had forgotten how to move without fear. The rancher handed her a warm cup of tea, and she drank it cautiously. He watched her closely, noticing every subtle change in expression, every tremble in her hands. This was someone who had been through unimaginable fear, and now he had the responsibility of helping her find comfort again. After breakfast, the rancher suggested they take a short walk outside. The air was crisp, and the fields stretched endlessly under the clear morning sky. She hesitated, but he offered his hand. Slowly she took it, feeling the warmth and steadiness in his grip. Step by step they walked toward the barn, past the animals grazing quietly, past fences and open fields that seemed to stretch to the horizon. For the first time in a long while she felt the world could be safe, if only for a few moments. As they walked, she whispered, almost to herself, I don't know why anyone would do that to me. Her voice was barely audible, yet the pain in it struck him deeply.
Some people are cruel, he said gently, but not everyone.
There are people who care, who will help, and I am one of them. She looked at him, a mixture of doubt and hope in her eyes. Back at the ranch, he helped her into a warm shower, the steam filling the room and washing away some of the fear and dirt that clung to her. He left her privacy, giving her space, understanding that regaining dignity after trauma was as important as healing the body. She emerged later, wrapped in a soft towel, her hair damp but her eyes clearer. She seemed lighter, as if the small rituals of normal life were already beginning to mend her spirit. The rancher prepared a small breakfast for her again, keeping it simple but nourishing: eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. As she ate, he gently asked questions about her life, her family, her dreams. She answered in fragments at first, cautious and quiet, but gradually her words became more confident. He listened without interruption, offering encouragement, showing that her voice mattered. The simple act of being heard made her feel human again. After breakfast, the rancher contacted the local authorities. He told them that the woman had been left in the fields and needed protection, but he didn't press her for details she wasn't ready to share. He understood that trauma could make people afraid to speak. While waiting for further instructions from the authorities, he decided to keep her occupied, not allowing her mind to dwell on fear. He led her to the barn, showing her the animals. The sight of the horses stirred something in her. She moved slowly at first, her hand brushing over a horse's mane, her eyes wide with wonder. The rancher watched as a small smile formed on her face. It was subtle, but genuine. The horses, with their quiet presence, seemed to provide a sense of calm. She whispered, They make me feel safe." The rancher nodded. "They do. Sometimes animals can teach us trust again, step by step." The day passed slowly, filled with small victories. She laughed softly at a mischievous calf that had wandered too close, and the rancher found himself smiling along. Yet beneath the calm, he sensed her fear still lingered. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, made her tense. He realized that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and that would take patience and care. In the afternoon, the woman finally spoke about the incident. Though her words were halting and careful, she described being left alone in the field, how the cold had seeped into her bones, how helpless she had felt. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway, a sign of growing courage. The rancher listened quietly, never interrupting, nodding and understanding. He knew that listening could sometimes be more powerful than words of reassurance. She paused, looking down at her hands, then back at him. I don't know why I was left there." Her eyes filled with tears. The rancher reached out gently, placing a hand on hers. "Some people do terrible things, and sometimes there is no explanation, but it's not your fault. You survived, and that's what matters now." Her lips quivered, and she nodded slowly. For the first time, she seemed to accept that maybe she wasn't alone. The rancher then helped her prepare a small space where she could rest, a corner of the living room made comfortable with blankets and pillows. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "No one will bother you." She lay down, and for a while the only sounds were the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional sigh of relief escaping her lips. As evening approached, the rancher checked on her again. He made her a warm cup of tea and sat beside her quietly, letting her speak if she wished. She told him fragments of her story, small memories of happier times, fleeting images of family and friends. Each word was a small step forward, a reminder that life could be gentle again. He offered encouragement, a steady presence, showing her that trust could slowly return. Night fell, and the rancher realized the importance of keeping watch. He sat by the window, looking out over the dark fields, alert for any sign of trouble. She slept fitfully, shifting under the blankets, haunted by dreams of the past. He knew her journey was just beginning. Protecting her was not just about keeping her safe from harm, but about giving her the courage to live fully again. At one point she stirred in her sleep and whispered something, a single word, a name. The rancher leaned closer, straining to hear, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He felt a chill, realizing that the danger might not yet be over. Someone had left her to die once, and they might try again. He tightened his jaw, making a silent promise. No one would harm her while he was there. He had arrived in time once, and he would not fail her again. The next day, he began to take small steps to help her regain independence. He encouraged her to walk around the fields, to help with light chores, and to spend time with the animals. Each step was cautious, measured, and filled with uncertainty, but she began to move with a little more confidence each time. The rancher walked beside her, offering steady support, never pushing too hard, never letting her face the world alone. He also began to ask gently about her family and friends, carefully avoiding any pressure. She told him small pieces of her life, fragments that revealed a young woman who had once been full of laughter and dreams, now shadowed by fear. The rancher listened intently, never judging, always encouraging. He knew that rebuilding trust was a slow process, one that could not be rushed. Word of the young woman's rescue spread quietly through the community. Some neighbors admired the rancher's bravery while others whispered questions. But the rancher didn't care. What mattered was keeping her safe and helping her heal. The outside world, for now, could wait. Inside the ranch there was only safety, care, and the beginnings of hope. As the sun set, painting the fields with shades of gold and orange, the woman finally allowed herself a genuine smile. It was small, fleeting, but it was real. The rancher saw it and felt a surge of hope. For the first time, he believed that she could recover, that the darkness she had endured could be replaced with light. And he promised himself that he would do everything in his power to make that promise real. Even in the quiet of the night, as they sat by the fire, the rancher knew the road ahead would not be easy. There were questions unanswered, dangers still lurking, and memories that would not fade. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. She had survived, she had hope, and he had made a promise he would never break. Somewhere in the back of his mind he also knew that the truth about who had left her to die would eventually come to light. And when it did, he would be ready, not just to protect her, but to ensure that justice was served. For now, though, he focused on the small victories. A smile, a laugh, a step forward. Each one was a sign that she was beginning to reclaim her life. And as she drifted to sleep that night, resting safely for the first time in what felt like forever, the rancher whispered to himself, "You are safe now, and I will make sure you always stay that way." The next morning the rancher rose early, as he always did, but his thoughts were far from the usual tasks of feeding animals and checking fences. He could not stop thinking about the young woman. Though she was recovering, he knew she was still fragile. The fear in her eyes had not completely disappeared, and he could sense that the danger that had nearly ended her life was still very real. He had to act carefully, both to protect her and to find the truth about who had left her on that rope. After breakfast, he suggested they spend the morning outside. The sun was gentle, and the air carried the scent of fresh earth and growing grass. She walked slowly, her movements cautious but determined. The rancher stayed close, guiding her when the ground was uneven, and encouraging her when she hesitated. "You're doing very well," he said softly. "Step by step you'll get stronger." She smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of his words, and for the first time she seemed to believe she could be safe. Later, when they returned inside, the rancher sat down at his desk, sorting through his thoughts and planning. He knew the authorities would investigate, but he also understood that time was precious. If someone had left her to die once, they might try again. He needed to gather information carefully without alarming her, and start piecing together what had happened. He began by asking her gently about her day-to-day life before the incident. "Did you know anyone who might have wanted to hurt you?" he asked, careful not to sound like he was pressuring her. She hesitated, looking down at her hands.
I don't know, she whispered.
"I can't remember if anyone seemed angry at me or why someone would do this." Her voice trembled, but she spoke honestly. The rancher nodded, understanding that she was scared. Some memories would return slowly. Others might take time to trust again. While she rested in a warm corner of the house, the rancher decided to begin a quiet investigation. He visited neighbors, asking questions about unusual activity in the fields without revealing her identity. Everyone remembered seeing someone strange near the barn the previous day, but no one had dared to interfere. It seemed that the perpetrator had chosen an isolated spot carefully, hoping no one would notice. The rancher felt a surge of anger, but he kept his emotions in check. He had to remain calm to protect her and gather evidence. Back at the ranch, the young woman spent time with the animals. She brushed the horses' manes and fed the calves, small actions that made her feel useful and alive again. The rancher watched her from a distance, noticing how her posture had started to change. She was still cautious, but she no longer flinched at every sound. Each laugh, each small smile, was proof that she was reclaiming her strength. As afternoon approached, the rancher sat beside her, gently encouraging her to speak. She shared memories of her childhood, of school friends, of small adventures she had taken in her town. Her voice grew stronger with each story, and he could see her confidence returning. He listened carefully, never interrupting, always showing that her words mattered. The simple act of being heard gave her courage she had not felt in a long time. Later, they discussed what steps to take next. The rancher suggested that once she was ready, they should go to the authorities together to provide a statement. She looked nervous but nodded, realizing that this was an important step in reclaiming her life. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I don't want them to find me again." The rancher placed a reassuring hand on hers. "I'll be with you every step of the way. You're not alone anymore." She took a deep breath, the first real sense of hope in weeks filling her chest. That evening, as the sky turned orange and pink, the rancher noticed movement at the edge of the field. A shadow shifted among the trees, and his instincts immediately went on alert. He moved closer to the window, watching carefully. Whoever had left the young woman behind might still be near, watching, waiting. He knew he had to be vigilant. He spoke to her quietly. "Stay here. I'll check outside." She nodded, trusting him completely. With a flashlight in hand, he stepped into the fading light, scanning the fields and trees. There was no one visible, but he could sense that danger might still be close. He made a mental note to reinforce security around the ranch and to remain alert at all times. The next day, he took the young woman into town to gather some basic supplies. She moved slowly, still cautious of the outside world, but he stayed close, guiding and protecting her. People in the town were kind, offering smiles and polite conversation, unaware of the ordeal she had survived. The rancher encouraged her to smile back, reminding her that not everyone in the world was cruel.
After returning to the rancher began to document everything they had observed and learned so far.
He created a careful record of her injuries, the location where she was found, and the timeline of events. He knew that having a clear record would be essential for authorities and could help protect her in the future. He also began reaching out to trusted friends and neighbors for support, quietly building a network of people who could help if danger returned. That evening, the young woman expressed a fear she had been carrying silently. "What if they come back?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The rancher took her hand in his. "We will be ready, and we won't let them hurt you again. You survived once, and you will survive again, with help this time." She nodded, feeling the strength of his words, and for the first time she began to believe that she could be safe. Over the next few days, the rancher and the young woman worked together to prepare the ranch. They checked locks, reinforced fences, and made sure there were safe areas where she could retreat if needed. He also taught her basic skills to care for herself and stay alert, all while ensuring she never felt pressured. The sense of teamwork and purpose gave her confidence, helping her recover not just physically, but emotionally as well. Meanwhile, the rancher continued his quiet investigation. He visited local shops and farms, asking subtle questions, looking for anyone who might have seen something unusual. One by one, small pieces of information began to emerge. A witness mentioned seeing a suspicious vehicle near the field a few days before the young woman was found. Another mentioned hearing strange noises at night. Each detail was small, but together they began to form a clearer picture of what had happened. With each discovery, the rancher shared only what was necessary with the young woman, carefully protecting her from fear and panic. He understood that knowledge without support could overwhelm her. Instead, he focused on making her feel safe and supported while taking steps to gather the truth and ensure justice. One afternoon, while working in the barn, the young woman suddenly froze. She looked toward the doorway, eyes wide with recognition. The rancher followed her gaze and saw nothing unusual at first, but he could sense her fear.
"What is it?" he asked gently.
She whispered, "I think I've seen him before. The one who left me." Her voice trembled. The rancher knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We will not let him hurt you again, I promise." She nodded, holding tightly to his words. It was clear that the past was not entirely behind her, but she was learning that she did not have to face it alone. That night, they sat by the fire discussing the small victories of the day. She had fed the animals without hesitation, walked through the fields with confidence, and shared her memories without fear. Each success, no matter how small, was a step forward. The rancher reminded her of that, praising her courage and resilience. She listened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel proud. In the quiet moments before sleep, the rancher reflected on the journey so far. The young woman had been through so much, yet she was alive, strong, and beginning to trust again. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The perpetrator might still be near, and justice had not yet been served. But he also knew that together, they were stronger than fear. Together, they would face whatever came next. And as she drifted to sleep that night, feeling safe for the first time in weeks, the rancher sat by the window, watching the fields. He thought about the steps they had taken, the trust that had been built, and the small victories that had brought hope back into her life. He made a quiet promise to himself and to her. They would uncover the truth, ensure safety, and protect the life that had been so nearly lost. The night was still, but the rancher knew the story was far from over. Danger might still lurk in shadows, and the journey to justice would be long. But for now, in the warmth of the ranch, 2 lives had found trust, safety, and courage. And that was the beginning of something stronger than fear, something that would guide them through the challenges yet to come. The following morning, the rancher woke before dawn, his mind already planning the day ahead. He had spent weeks caring for the young woman, helping her heal and regain her strength. But he knew that protecting her meant more than just keeping her safe at the ranch. It was time to ensure justice was served. Whoever had left her on that rope had to be held accountable, and he would not let fear or hesitation stop him. He gently woke her and offered breakfast. "Today we take another step," he said softly, trying not to alarm her. "We're going to the authorities to tell them everything. You don't have to face this alone. I'll be with you every step of the way." She nodded, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. Though she was nervous, the trust she had developed in him gave her the courage to face what had happened. As they drove into town, the young woman's hands trembled slightly, gripping the edge of her seat. The rancher spoke calmly, pointing out familiar landmarks and keeping the conversation light, helping her focus on something other than the fear. "See that barn?" he said. "I helped repair it last month. The horses love it." She managed a small smile, feeling comfort in the ordinary details of life, a reminder that the world was not entirely dangerous. When they arrived at the local authorities' office, the rancher escorted her inside. The officers greeted them with quiet concern, understanding the situation's seriousness. The young woman hesitated, but he stayed by her side, offering steady support. Together they recounted the events, carefully describing where she had been found, what had happened, and what little information she could remember about the perpetrator. The officers listened attentively, taking detailed notes. They were impressed with the rancher's thoroughness and calm presence, realizing that his quick action had likely saved her life. As the young woman spoke, she began to feel a sense of empowerment. For the first time since the incident, she realized that telling her story could bring change, could protect others, and could finally hold the person who had harmed her accountable. After leaving the authorities' office, they returned to the ranch. The rancher suggested they take a walk through the fields, letting her regain some sense of normalcy after the intense morning. She moved with more confidence now, brushing her hands along the tall grass, listening to the soft sounds of nature around her. Each step strengthened her, reminding her that she was not defined by what had happened, but by her courage to survive and move forward. Later that afternoon, the rancher received a call from one of his trusted neighbors. They had seen the suspicious vehicle again near the outskirts of town. The rancher immediately informed the authorities, providing them with the new lead. A sense of purpose settled over him. He had not only protected her, but now he was helping bring justice to the person who had caused so much pain. The days that followed were filled with careful preparation and quiet vigilance. The young woman continued to regain her strength, learning to navigate the ranch confidently and care for the animals. She also began to participate in small investigations, sharing observations about the people and places she had seen before. Each contribution, no matter how small, gave her confidence and a sense of control over her life. Finally, the authorities were ready. With the rancher at her side, the young woman confronted the person responsible. The meeting was tense but controlled, with law enforcement ensuring safety and fairness. She spoke clearly and bravely, recounting the events as they had occurred. The rancher remained close, a silent support, giving her the strength to face the past without fear. The perpetrator was arrested, and the young woman's courage had helped prevent further harm. The relief she felt was immense, a weight lifted from her shoulders. She realized that she was no longer a victim, but someone who had reclaimed her life with determination, resilience, and support from someone who truly cared. Returning to the ranch, the young woman allowed herself to rest, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in weeks. She walked through the fields, touched the horses, and smiled at the calves. Each small interaction reminded her that life could be gentle again. The rancher watched her, feeling satisfaction not just in the justice that had been served, but in the healing he had helped foster. Evenings at the ranch became a time of reflection and gratitude. The young woman often sat by the fire with the rancher, sharing stories about her childhood, dreams for the future, and small joys she had rediscovered. The rancher listened, offering guidance and encouragement. Their bond, formed in the shadow of fear and strengthened through trust, had grown into a quiet friendship rooted in respect, care, and shared experience. Over the following weeks, she slowly resumed activities that had once been ordinary, but now felt extraordinary. She helped with chores, tended to the animals, and even ventured into town with the rancher. Each experience built her confidence, reinforcing the lesson that she was capable and resilient. The rancher, for his part, continued to watch over her with quiet vigilance. He knew the emotional scars would take time to heal, but he was patient. Every smile, every laugh, every small step forward was a victory. He had not only saved a life, but he had helped restore it, showing her that trust and kindness could exist even after cruelty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the fields in gold and orange, the young woman looked out over the land. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You saved my life." The rancher smiled, shaking his head gently. "No, you saved yourself. I just helped, but I'm proud of you." The quiet strength in their shared silence said more than words could. They had both faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and together they had emerged stronger. The rancher had provided safety, guidance, and unwavering support, while she had shown courage, resilience, and the willingness to trust again. As night fell, they sat by the fireplace, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The young woman, now safe and growing stronger every day, realized that her life had changed, not just because the danger had passed, but because she had found someone who cared deeply, someone who had shown her the power of compassion and courage. In the weeks that followed, the rancher and the young woman continued to work on rebuilding her life. They took small trips to town, reconnected with the community, and celebrated each small victory along the way. Friends and neighbors, inspired by the story of her rescue and recovery, offered support and encouragement. She no longer felt alone, and her world, once filled with fear and uncertainty, began to feel bright and full of possibilities. Eventually, the young woman began to speak publicly about her experience with the rancher's guidance. Her story became an inspiration, showing others that even after darkness, there could be hope, healing, and courage. She spoke not just of fear but of resilience, trust, and the importance of community and compassion. The rancher, though humble, took pride in knowing he had made a real difference. He had acted quickly, courageously, and with empathy, saving a life and helping someone reclaim it. His quiet dedication had not only brought justice, but had restored faith in humanity, showing that one person's actions could change everything. Years later, the young woman would remember the ranch as the place where she found safety, trust, and a new beginning. The rancher remained a guiding presence in her life, a symbol of courage, kindness, and unwavering support. Their bond, forged in moments of fear and strengthened by compassion, endured as a testament to the power of humanity in the face of cruelty. And though the memory of that fateful day would never completely fade, it no longer defined her. She had survived, she had healed, and she had found a life filled with hope, thanks to the man who had refused to let her die. The rancher had arrived in time once, and together they had ensured that her story ended not in tragedy, but in courage, justice, and a renewed belief in the goodness of the world. The sun set on the ranch, casting a warm glow over the fields, the animals, and the home where safety and care had been restored. Inside, the young woman smiled, feeling the warmth of both the fire and the unwavering support that had carried her through the darkest moments of her life. She had been left to die on a rope, but thanks to the rancher, her life had changed forever. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, hope, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone.